Okay, this is a project overview for a command line tool built in Rust that uses a SQLite database to take a command line input and print the output to the terminal. This was done concurrently with a Python project to sort of evaluate performance enhancements of Rust over Python. And we'll get into it with the project overview here. So what this project does is it takes a command line argument, passes it to main, and then executes some functions we've defined in our lib.rs to create a table in a database, import CSV data, in this instance it's video game sales data, to that database, and then pass that string query to query the database and print the output to the terminal. By doing both projects side by side and the link to the Python projects in the README, you're able to see that how Rust is sort of a good tool for maybe you're prototyping in Python, but you're actually developing in Rust because it's so much more efficient. So we'll get into the actual project itself. So three main files I want to highlight: main, lib, and cargo2ml. Cargo2ml holds all of our dependencies. Rust packaging is really easy. You cargo add in the command line, and it will automatically, plus your dependency, sort of like pip install, it'll automatically add to your cargo2ml. And then cargo lock is something you wouldn't ever edit, but it stores sort of the state of your binary so that it can be run elsewhere. So our main, all this does is calls lib.rs functions. It also has clap to parse command line input and a profiler to measure performance. And you can see down in main, other than the profiler and the command line input receiving or parsing, it's just creating the table, importing the CSV data, and then querying the CSV data. So let's go over to lib and see what that actually looks like. Here's the create table function. All it does is create a table if none exists, and it's hard-coded because we know what the data looks like from the CSV. Importing from CSV just takes that data, pushes it into a database table so that we can query it. And then you've got the query function, which just takes that string query that was passed in the command line and prints the result. So let's see what this looks like when we call cargo run query, and we'll do a very simple query, select star from game sales, which is the table we created, limit 5. So here's our output. We have our profiler information. Creating the table took 270 microseconds, 74 milliseconds to import the data, and 222 microseconds to query it. This output is a RuSQLite row. That's why you see the sort of column name and then the value with its type as well, which is actually pretty nice for debugging, but a little bit different than the Python output. Now, one thing to notice, that is how you would run this file if you were, developing it. But once you use the makefile command release, or if you just call cargo build flagged release in the command line, what Rust does is it makes an executable binary in this target folder, and we can see that here. I've actually moved that outside of the target folder so that it actually uploads to the repo to the target folder in the gitignore. But you just execute that like a standard executable with your flag and your query. And it does the same thing. So that is now an executable file that Rust has packaged with our dependencies. It's actually really convenient, really nice, and that can be distributed. Going over just to sort of conclude with what we saw in the performance outputs, Python took about 1.33 seconds to run a similar query. This one was limit 10. So you can see that the performance enhancement, even for such a small database, is huge. One thing I'll note for generative AI tools, things like Copilot, CodeWhisper, and ChatGPT, because Rust is a new language, are not that good at giving you complete Rust code. That said, they are really good at understanding the syntax rules. And so getting good at sort of prompt engineering and knowing which questions to ask, I found myself very frequently writing lines of Rust code, the compiler getting mad at me and me putting the compiler errors into those generative AI tools, and they would explain why Rust was throwing those errors, and it made it much easier to actually get started developing in Rust.